Welcome, everyone. My name is Libby Murray, and you are joining us for Lifetime's Adoption webinar for the month of February. And I just want to thank you all for being here tonight. We have 3 amazing guest speakers on who are going to share their personal testimony and experience with open adoption. And I look forward to just seeing how they will bless you with their story and their tips and their encouragement. And I welcome all of your feedback. So I also want to introduce Kim King, who's part of Lifetime's team of adoption coordinators that works primarily to help educate and prepare the adoptive families. And Kim is going to review how you can participate tonight and get your questions submitted so that our guests can answer it for you. So Kim, why don't we talk a little bit about that?
Thanks, Libby. So you'll see on your screen, if you are in the webinar online, you should see a questions or chat box. Click that, it'll open up, you can start typing in, or you may just see a spot to type in right now. So that's how you can send us your questions, comments, and feedback. All are welcome during the webinar tonight, which is a kind of a perk when you're attending live and taking that time out of your schedule to meet with us live. If you are joining us by telephone or cell phone and you're not able to see the chat or questions feature, you can email us the old-fashioned way. Libby, what email should we have them send it to?
Why don't you go ahead and just email webinar@lifetimeadoption.com.
Okay, so I'll type that in here as we get going. Webinar@lifetimeadoption.com. Libby and I will both see those in our inbox, and we'll make sure that those get answered. Now, of course, if there's something specific to your path that you'd rather have a one-on-one discussion about, we will be back in the office tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. Pacific time. The regular office number is 530-432-7373, and our hotline is 1-800-923-6784. So those are the 2 numbers that you can use. Now the hotline runs 24/7. Now if you already have a coordinator here at Lifetime, of course, feel free to reach out to her directly via phone call or email. If you don't have a coordinator, feel free to reach out to me, Kim@lifetimeadoption.com, and I'll hopefully either direct your email accordingly or answer your question myself. And if you're very new to Lifetime, as a prospective adoptive family who is looking for a child to add to your family, then I would welcome you to fill out our free application online at lifetimeadoption.com/apply, and I'll type that in here as soon as Libby starts talking again, and I can multitask by listening and typing. So Libby, back to you.
Great. I just want to introduce our guests tonight. I had the pleasure of helping to coordinate their adoption just over 7 years ago, and just watching adoption through their lives, I feel inspired, and I see them as an example of how unique every adoption truly is, and that it just seems that every adoption that happens is meant to be when you seek it for the right reasons and for the sincerest reasons possible. So I just want to introduce, we have Adrienne joining us, and she placed her baby boy with Doug and Cheryl. Are you all there?
Yes, we are.
Great.
I'm here.
Okay. Since we have 3 of you, I want this to be conversational and to just naturally flow and to bring out elements of your story. But I also want everyone to be able to hear us too. So hopefully those in the audience will be patient with us as we figure out who's going to speak next and how that'll go. But I think it's going to be a really great call tonight. And I know we have a mixed audience tonight, which I also think is very special because we want to touch on all the different aspects of adoption, all the way from just thinking about adopting a child to thinking about choosing adoption for a child and providing by choosing adoptive parents as a birth mother. So Adrienne, I want to start with you and find out, how early did you know that you were pregnant, and that how long did it take you to start thinking about adoption once you found out you were pregnant?
Well, I found out that I was pregnant just a few weeks.
Oops.
Bit of a situation there, but I found out. I kept it from my parents for about a week, but you can't hide certain things for so long. And when they found out, of course, you know, being 19 and being unmarried and being in a religious household, it wasn't the most favorable thing. But they were there, they were present, they were alert, and they just gave me all my options. You know, they gave me the option of abortion, but they told me, you know, what our faith said about that, and you know, things that I couldn't counter with that. They told me I could keep the baby, and how hard that would be, and also I could place the baby for adoption if I needed to, and also how hard that would be. And I was originally planning on keeping the baby once I had gotten in touch with AJ's birth father, and talked to him, and I was originally keeping the baby, and I had gone out and bought packing plays and Pampers and things like that, and then one night I had come home from work at about 2 o'clock in the morning, and my mom had gone online and done some research about African American adoptions online.com and left the packet for me. And I had mulled over it that night, and I prayed, and I said, okay. And then I wrote out a list of pros and cons about keeping the baby versus placing the baby. And my list of pros outweigh my list of cons, and that's when I made the call to Lifetime and to my favorite, Libby.
This is not a personal plug for me because I'm just a tiny part of this adoption story, but so it's interesting that you say that you were planning on parenting him and that it was actually your mom that started the research for you. So was it hard to, I don't know what the word I'm looking for, was it hard to grasp or to accept that she was suggesting you think about this?
Kinda, because I was really saying, like, what are you trying to say to me without saying it to me? But once I got my own adult mind together and looked at it for what it really was, it wasn't so much a, here you go, this is what you need to do. This is maybe something that you really need to look at.
So, which I think too is unique because not every birth mother has the support of her parents or her family. So your family was really behind you, whatever you decided. How many other people did you involve when you were thinking about adoption before you decided to pursue adoption? How many people did you involve in that decision making?
My family, that was it, because at the end of the day, that's what really mattered to me. I didn't really seek too many outside opinions, and that's really where it lied. Once I made my decision, I came home from work one night and made the call with my mom right there beside me because I didn't, in case I had any questions, I wanted her there. And I think we made the call on speakerphone just so she could hear everything and, you know, take in everything at the same time I was, so that if I did have any questions or just anything I didn't understand, she could, you know, be there for me.
And so for those of you joining us online, you can see the picture that I have up right now. On one side we have Adrienne and her son AJ, and on the other side we have Doug and Cheryl and their son AJ. So you can kind of get an idea of who's talking to you tonight. But as you can see, this is an African-American adoption on both sides. And I know that sometimes when I work with particularly African-American birth mothers, sometimes they have additional concerns or obstacles or criteria that they want to make sure happen in their adoption. So Adrienne, were you already, you know, had the topic of open adoption ever been introduced to you before you faced your pregnancy, or was it kind of a new concept to think about choosing parents?
The topic of open adoption was never really, I never really looked at it that way because my dad was adopted, but his adoption was real different, and it was done in a different era where they didn't really talk about it. You didn't really know who your mother was. It was kind of one of those things where she kind of found you when you were grown type of situation. But I know that when my mom had brought it up to me, I told her, I said, Mom, I can't do an adoption and not know where my child is. I can't do an adoption and not know what's going on and what these people are doing and what these people are saying and all of that. I can't deal with that unknown. And that's when she said to me, you know, well, there's open adoption, and these people do open adoption. And I told her, I said, Mom, you know, if I can't see him eventually, I don't want to do it. And she said, well, when you talk about your open adoption plan, you can talk about those things and you can lay those things out ahead of time. So once I had that reassurance, I was more comfortable with it than I was from the onset.
Mm-hmm. So then I know you and I were talking a little bit earlier. You had things in mind of the way it had to go if you were going to do adoption, and that one of the things that you actually tell other women who are thinking about adoption is to be clear about your expectations and how you want things to go. So what was in your mind that led you to Doug and Cheryl?
Well, number one, I knew when I called, just being African-American myself, I knew I wanted an African-American family. Mm-hmm. And I knew that I wanted them to be married. I knew I wanted them to be stable. I knew I wanted them to have some kind of faith in their lives. And I knew I did not want them close to me because I know how I am, and I know that I wouldn't create a healthy separation unless there was some kind of distance. And I knew that I also wanted them comfortable with visitation somewhere down the line, whether it be 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. I wanted them comfortable with that ahead of time because I didn't want to place my baby and then all of a sudden, you know, as they say, the script gets flipped, and then all of a sudden I'm just left with nothing. So
yeah. And I'm glad you brought that up because I think that that's something that when people aren't familiar with open adoption and then they start learning about open adoption, they don't understand that even part of that choice is choosing how close that adoptive family might live to you, and that even played into your decision was I knew my own limits and temptations and how that would make a struggle for me, so I wanted them to be out of state. Did you have a mileage in mind, or was it just more a general, like, I don't want them to be very close?
I didn't want them to be close. I didn't want them to be somewhere where I could get in my car or get on a bus or get on a train and be there in a short amount of time, because then it would be no point. Even when the adoption process went through, I really didn't contact them for almost a year because I wanted to create a healthy separation. I wanted them to feel like this was their child, and not that, you know, I had this, you know, overbearing birth mom who's calling all the time and writing all the time. And I wanted to create a healthy environment for everybody.
Adrienne, I have a question. This is Kim.
Sure.
When you pictured visits, you know, from the planning standpoint, before you ever met them, how did you see that going, or in your mind, what did a visit mean to you?
Well, like I said, because I didn't know what anybody's comfort level was from the beginning, I kind of envisioned more so, I go down, we meet somewhere, I see him, I touch him, and then I move on. And that's what I envisioned. But once I began to know Doug and Cheryl and found out that Cheryl and I are like kind of like kindred spirits that were just born in different eras, it made it a whole lot easier because her heart is my heart. So it just made the visitation it didn't make it weird, it didn't make it awkward. It just made it like a family reunion, like you're visiting family.
So, and what I loved, Kim, I wanted to bring up too, because Adrienne told me something earlier I thought was funny, but it was proof. Because for those of you who are hoping to adopt a child, maybe you have already created your adoption profile, or you've heard of this and you're thinking, how am I gonna put my life into a little booklet for these women to just learn about me while they decide what they want to do. So Adrienne, can you tell us what you told me earlier about what stood out about Doug and Cheryl's profile?
Well, you know, I told Libby earlier that when I talked to her, I told her I wanted African American families, and when I had gotten the package, I said, okay, she sent me a whole plethora, and I asked the question, did she even pay attention to what I was saying? But once I started flipping through the couples and the different people, because there were some, you know, singles in there, and I said, okay, what stood out to me the most was, number one, that it was in full color. It was absolutely in full color. But what drew me to it was the fact that there was this ribbon, and the ribbon was orange, gold, and brown. And it was just that small, minute detail that it was almost like it was hand.
Mm-hmm. And I just I had to share that because I want for people to realize that every detail that you pour in to your adoption plan is noticed when it's the right fit, when it's a woman who's ready to choose you, and that who knows if it'll be the ribbon that stands out to your child's first parent, or your photos, or a comment that you make on your cover, or the way you know, have your reference letters in the back. But I love, after all these years, Adrienne, that you still remember that.
Yeah, I do. I'm sorry, my connection dropped. But anyway, I do remember small details like that, and it really made a difference.
So, so we have Doug and Cheryl here on the other side, and I just want to briefly touch on what brought you guys to decide to adopt in the first place, but then to go into what made you decide to pursue open adoption.
Hi, everyone. This is Cheryl. Pleased to be here. And first, I want to thank Libby and Kim for having us. And we love Adrienne. And if Adrienne was drawn to a full color spread and a ribbon, she and I are kindred spirits for sure. Because I would have done that same exact thing. I found out a long time ago that I was unable to have children. And when we were married, Douglas didn't have children either, but wanted them. Mm-hmm. And so we had talked about different methods, and both of us who don't have a whole lot of nieces and nephews that we've taken care of throughout our lives, I knew that I wanted one child, and fertility was not an option for me. And just had this whole vision that I would have, like, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 children at once, but we wanted to adopt. And we took classes here in Atlanta, and learned a lot about adoption, learned a lot about the state system and children that are in foster care, and how hard it would be to adopt a newborn. And that was one thing that we wanted, was a newborn. And we found Lifetime, and we went through actually 2 failed adoptions prior to this. For everyone that is on the line today, don't give up. We went through 2 failed adoptions because God led us to the right one. And Alexander, for us, has always been the right one. It took a minute to get there. And if I do remember, Adrienne, and correct me if I'm wrong, we were actually not available when Adrienne first came.
Oh, gosh.
We were...
so I have to...
Go ahead.
Yeah, I had to tell this because I told this to Libby earlier. When I found out, when I saw the book and everything, I called and I told Libby, I said, I want Doug and Cheryl. I want Doug and Cheryl. She said, okay, let me find out if they're matched, and I'll get back to you. I said, okay. Hung up. She called me back, and she said, oh, Adrienne, I'm so sorry. They're already matched with another young lady. And I said to her, well, check with them if they'll take my baby too. And then she said, well, I'll check, but I don't know. And I just got immediately discouraged. And I'm not really one to, you know, quote unquote, get on my knees and pray. But I got on my knees that night, and I was just like, God, listen, whatever you have to do, make this baby these parents available to my baby. And I didn't know that he was going to literally take a baby from him. But, you know, and I kind of apologized to Cheryl, like, I didn't mean to break your heart, but sorry. It just kind of had to happen that way.
So you guys had gone through a birth mother who changed her mind before you matched with Adrienne.
Correct. Yes. She had decided, like, it was the day after Thanksgiving, a few months before AJ was born. And she had other children, and she actually went to a visit. And something that Libby and I had touched on earlier today as well is that in the African American community, we tend to look to support from our families before we think about being an adoptive mother or becoming an adoptive parent. And we look to, our surroundings, our support systems, our communities, and sometimes it is not favorable, but it was favorable for us. And if you're thinking about it, just the mere thought, it's favorable for you as well. But that particular young lady, her family thought it was best for her, and hopefully to this day they are still supporting her. But she had changed her mind after, visiting with her family for the holidays. And I don't know if they convinced her or she just, changed her mind. That was, what was planned for her. And we went back in, we weren't really open-minded about it this next time around because we did things in our home. We made arrangements in our lives that we were going to have a child. And so, looking in the room, there's no baby. We just went back into it like, with a 50-50 shot going in each time. So when we were first approached with Adrienne, it was that, it's a 50-50 go. She could change her mind once the baby is born. But after the first conversation, we knew that we went into it the wrong way. We knew that Adrienne was on board and we were on board with her. Just from that first conversation where she's a talker like me, and she just told us everything about her life, about what her life plans were. And that was appealing to us. As far as going into an open adoption, it was thought about, we contemplated it, and there were some things going into what we thought an open adoption would be for us. And it is far beyond what we went into thinking what an open adoption is. We have really joined our two families together. The visits, it was kind of difficult that first year. And, because we wanted Adrienne to have her separation and we wanted to get to know our child. We wanted to know our gift. And but after she came down the first time and I saw how he looked at her and she looked at him, it was like, oh yeah, this is a family, a blended family. And we remained that way. So yeah, I could talk all day.
No, and that's good. But you told me something earlier, Cheryl, about one of the things that stood out to you was not only about how Adrienne thought of AJ's just immediate future or just even before his birth, getting this adoption in place, but you told me that you loved that she thought about his life after the birth.
Yes.
And Adrienne kind of told me something similar, and she was talking about how she just laid out all of her expectations right away. And I always encourage people, especially in those first two conversations, I would say, to just try and talk about as much as you can, because it would be hard, I think, after a child's born to have something come up, say, such as visits in the future, and to not have already discussed it, because then everything's so in the moment, it's so emotional and fresh. What were those first couple conversations like? I mean, you said that you did feel almost a comfort because she was so open. I guess kind of where I want to go is I hear so often people just saying how surprised they were, how much they cared for their child's birth mom almost immediately. Did it ever catch you off guard that it just felt so right?
Not really. It didn't catch me off guard. I think the conversation that Adrienne and I had about his name, and in the African American community, I can tell you we've got some names that are similar. And I'll never forget the conversation that we had when she called and she says, well, I was wondering, could you think of a name? And we were like, yeah. And we thought of Alexander, and we both have a favorite uncle with the first name James, and so we named him Alexander James. And she said, "Oh, thank you. I just didn't want one of those names nobody could pronounce." And I thought that was the cutest, hilarious thing. And she started talking to him and calling him Alex, and which we call him Alex now. We started off with AJ, but now he's Alex. Okay. And we did some Build-A-Bears, and we still play it every now and then, where she's singing to him. One thing we've learned about Adrienne is that she is a beautiful singer, and every now and then at the holidays she sang at a church function, and Doug actually took it and made a video with Adrienne singing, and he infused pictures of AJ. And I play it every now and then because I know if Adrienne had AJ, she would be a dynamic mother. Mm-hmm. I think she has so much love. And I heard that in our first conversations. And to this day, she hasn't changed one bit, not one bit. Everything that I heard in those initial conversations, she is still that same person today. And she loves him and cares about him. Her entire family does. And I know Priscilla is there with Adrienne right now, and AJ's grandma. And, you know, I remember when we came to Delaware, we actually had a little bump in our road, and don't get discouraged, anyone listening, where the birth father, and Adrienne, I hope you don't mind.
No, ma'am, not at all.
The birth father wasn't on board with the adoption. Mm-hmm. He decided he wanted to be a dad. And so, you know, we told him, well, you need a car seat and a plan. And he didn't have either. So, you know, it worked out. I'll just leave it at that. And we immediately got in a car and drove to Delaware. And, you know, we met Adrienne face to face the first time. I held AJ the first time. And I remember walking in the hallway with Priscilla mm-hmm. and having a conversation with her about this entire journey up to that point that AJ was born. I actually was on the phone when Adrienne went into labor, and I heard him being born. We couldn't make it because we were in New Orleans when AJ was, well, I was back in Atlanta. Doug was still in New Orleans when AJ was born. Mm-hmm. And I remember talking to Priscilla about everything that happened up to the day that AJ was born, and then the day after, and how everything just came together. And Herb was in the hospital, Adrienne's dad, when AJ was born, and he told me to just pray. He said, just pray. I'm telling you now, it'll all work out, and we'll see you soon. And she reiterated that to me when I met her, and we went downstairs and had coffee, and it was there they are. It was just amazing. And the family, our entire unit, all of us together, when we came up last summer, it was just like we just never missed a beat in 7 years.
Wow. And so the slide I just popped up, now Adrienne, I think these are your mother, father, and sister, is that right?
Yes, my mom and dad are on either side, and my sister is in the middle. The one that looks like Laura Winslow, that's my sister.
She does. And so this is all going on in the hospital. And I do think that, and I've used your story as an example for other women when they are unsure of, you know, the baby's biological father's support or approval of the adoption. And I know you've talked to women too about the conversation that you had with him, and that sometimes is a question. Usually it comes out before the hospital experience happens, but what I think is such an important part of your story, and someone actually chimed in with a comment. They said God brought together a perfect match with them, and I know that all of you agree on that. And now, Adrienne, your dad is a preacher.
Yes.
So, I mean, your faith is a huge thread through your life, but that not only were you praying, but that also I remember when it came down to talking with Alex's biological father, that it got down to Doug. Even he either offered or did have a conversation with him one-on-one, and then I think your father, Adrienne, offered to speak man-to-man to him. But that, now correct me if I'm wrong, but what I remember being the impact was, Adrienne, you being firm in what you wanted for this baby and how things were going to be if you decided to raise this baby.
Almost definitely. With my son's father, I had kind of kept the decision from him for a while, from the advice of not only my family, but also from legal counsel as well. And it got to a point where he had just become incessant with the phone calls. And I'm really, I don't know if you noticed, but I'm very much a realist, so I'm just going to give it to you how it is. And I did, and he did not like it. One of the things that really pushed me toward the adoption was the fact that he had stated that he did not want my son in church, and unfortunately, you cannot tell me where to take or where not to take my child, especially when I've carried him for almost 10 months. Now, with that, he had talked to me. He had talked to Doug. I think he had talked to Cheryl. He had talked to my dad, and I don't think the conversation with my father was as nice as the conversation with Doug and Cheryl, but hey. With me, I sat down with him and also a social worker from the hospital, and the social worker was there, and neither one of us was talking, and she asked me, did I want to talk to him alone? And I looked at her like, yeah, lady. And so she got up and left, and I said to him, you weren't here, point blank period, you weren't here. You don't know what it's like. And I said, and there is no way I can, let you just walk out of this hospital with this baby. And I said, you will break these people's hearts, and not only will you do it, I'm going to do it. And I have reiterated to these people that this baby belongs to them. This baby belongs to all of us, but they are going to raise this baby. And I said, and there are a lot of things that you need as a father that you don't have, and there are a lot of things that I need as a mother that I don't have, and neither of us is completely well equipped to care for this baby in the manner in which not only he needs but also deserves. And so we would be selfish, completely selfish, to keep this baby in an environment that is not conducive to healthy growth and healthy development, not only socially but also emotionally and spiritually. We would be literally chopping him down from the root. And what kind of parents would we be if we did that? He left that conversation with no real answers, but I just kind of felt at that point settled. And that following day I was discharged, and my son had to stay in the hospital, and we came and signed the papers. And I remember one thing, and I told this to Libby earlier, was the one thing that pushed my resolve was the fact that I talked to Cheryl and Doug while I was in the cafeteria with my mom, and I remember her crying on the phone. And one day, I never liked for Cheryl to do was cry, because we're both talkers, we're both emotional people, and I don't ever like to see or hear her cry. And she said, Adrienne, I said, Cheryl, you're going to get this baby, because I felt like I needed to encourage her. And she said, Adrienne, no, stop telling me that. No, I'm not going to get this baby, because her heart had already been broke before, and I could not break her heart again. So whatever I could do, would do, needed to do, had to do to make sure that this baby ended up in their arms, I did that.
But now, Cheryl and Doug, I mean, because from your experience having been matched before, it sounded like, I mean, it would have been disappointing, but that you would have understood if things, it wasn't that you were putting this pressure on Adrienne, it was that this was so important to her that she assumed that responsibility to bless you. But that, can you talk a little bit about, maybe to the people who are thinking, well, yeah, that's one of my main fears, is what if we meet this baby and then the adoption ends up not happening?
But those first 2 weeks, when AJ, like Adrienne just said, AJ had to stay in the hospital 7 extra days, and we couldn't do our interstate compact paperwork until he was released from the hospital. So we were in Delaware for 2 weeks. And, you know, there is always that fear that within those 14 days, as a matter of fact, we were there this time. We left on Valentine's Day,
Yep.
2006. And, you know, I said, I'm going to spend Valentine's Day in Georgia. I'm going to spend Valentine's Day in Georgia. I couldn't wait to leave because AJ is he was a beautiful baby.
Mm-hmm.
And looking at Adrienne, holding him, looking at her, I was like, oh man, I know he wants to raise his grandson. It just seemed like 2 weeks took forever. But during that 2 weeks, something else happened. We actually got to know the family. We went out to dinner, we took the baby out, and you know, every night.
Mall.
Yeah, we went to the mall. And it was always in that couple weeks, I wanted to, you know, go home. I wanted to be home just because I knew after that point, Adrienne couldn't change her mind. But it didn't matter at that, you know, once we got to that stage, it didn't matter. We went, when they took us out for fried bologna sandwiches, I think they won us over and we won them over too because we loved them. And so it just got to where we didn't think about, you know, there's that chance that, you know, she would change her mind or Eric would have changed his mind after we got in there. But what is meant to be was meant to be, and it happened for us, and it could happen for all of you. If you're thinking about the what ifs, that's something that should not even just really enter your mind, because you are going to adopt and you want to adopt. You wouldn't be on the line if you didn't want to. And there are so many children that could be blessed with families like ours and families like Adrienne's who supported her through the entire process. And with that was another thing that drew us to her because she had that support. We know if we can send AJ up there and we know he'd have a great time with them because Adrienne has the support system with her. And like I said, I think she would be a dynamic mom, and she will be. She will be.
Well, and we had a good question come in. I think is good for all three of you to share your perspective. But Cheryl, you brought up earlier how you looked to your family before deciding to adopt. And Adrienne, I know that obviously, as you said, your mother actually suggested that you look into this, but that there were many people in your life that didn't understand your decision. So when it comes to talking about the open adoption that you have today, Adrienne, let's start with you. So how do you explain your decision to others, or how do you describe what open adoption is to you, to people you feel comfortable sharing?
Well, the one thing that I can say to anybody, that before you can make others accept something that you've done, is that you have to accept it yourself. And once you get past the self-acceptance and then also get past the opinions of people, that's another thing that you just have to learn to accept and get past. Once I decided that I did not care what people thought about me or what they thought about what I did, I was able to just be vocal with it. Anybody that asks me about my child, I'm very upfront. He's my child. He just lives with people that raise him. You know, my son calls me Mama A. He doesn't call me Adrienne. There's no disconnect there. And so I'm very upfront and I'm very vocal about not only the decision of adoption just as a person, but also the decision of adoption as an African American, because it is not it's not common, and it's not standard practice, just culturally. And so forgive the jingling, that's the dog, but it is something that needs to be talked about. And so if I need to be a voice not only for the adoption itself, but also as a birth mother who was willing to, you know, put my pride aside and say, okay, I'll miss his first tooth or I'll miss his first steps, but I know that he's in great hands, and I know he's being well taken care of. And has seen more of the world in 7 years than I've seen in almost 27, and I'm so thankful that he has experiences and he has the parents that he has. He has great parents just like I had great parents. So I couldn't be any more thankful for what I've done, and I'm accepting of it, and I'm very vocal.
Mm-hmm. And so, Doug and Cheryl, when you have people in your life who know that you adopted your son, do you talk about the relationship you have with Adrienne and her family with everyone, or do you sort of discriminate who you trust with that information?
I think we talk about it. We're open about it. Not something we blurt out, but if it comes up, we talk about how we do have a open adoption with Adrienne, and that she's free to come down here at any time and see AJ and spend time with us and, and him and everything. That basically that we have what's really a very open adoption, whereas I think there's different degrees. When we first came into it, when we first even started talking about having an open adoption, it was like, well, do we just want to like send pictures, every now and then through a lawyer or something like that, or do we want to just send them an email? Or once we got to know Adrienne and her family, and most of it was when we got to know her from that very first phone call that we had with her. We knew that this would be an open adoption, that she would really be a part of our lives. But we had, all along we would have let AJ know about his birth mother, whether it was open adoption or not. He was going to know that he will know once he can fully understand it.
Well, and what I think, going back to just briefly, I don't want to revisit it too much because our hour is flying, but even through all of the drama that happened with the biological father, that you and Cheryl still extended an invitation to have an open adoption with him if he wanted that, which I think speaks a lot to your character, that you're sincere in pursuing an open adoption, and that it's not just about if you feel friendly and lovey-dovey with a birth parent.
One thing about the level of open adoptionness or openness in the adoption process, the adoption agency that we also work with in Delaware, they had certain standards on what open adoption is. It could range from what we have now to basically just sending once a year photos and a letter. And because AJ's birth father was, not close with us like we were with Adrienne and her family, we sent him a letter and photos, and, nothing became of that. And, we haven't had any contact. I always ask Adrienne, has she heard from him, or has she seen him, or whatever? And, we get updates periodically. But eventually, we have his name and we got a picture of him, and we've always said that we were going to let AJ know that he was adopted. Douglas has a cousin his cousin's wife was adopted, and she said that was the best thing that we could do, is talk to him about it now while he's young. And you're that close with the family. A lot of everyone in our lives really know that we have a really good relationship with Adrienne. I think Adrienne probably has like 1,500 Facebook friends, and I don't have that. But out of all of our Facebook friends, that's how we communicate. I call her Mama A, all over Facebook. She has pictures of him. There's a great picture. The picture that's up now is just last summer when we went to Delaware. And, our families, Adrienne has met my mom. Priscilla's been in my church here. Adrienne's been here a couple of times. She's been in our home. She's met my sister and interacted with my mom, my aunties, my cousins. And it's just been a really, really good open adoption. Everyone cannot have what we have. only because I think I'm that special. And I got Adrienne, and she's that special. But it's there. It's there. You have to, I wouldn't say put in the work. You have to put in the time and the energy into making the relationship a good one. And my lawyer too, she, said that what better way, like if something happened medically with AJ, we would have to provide bone marrow or anything. We couldn't do that. But Adrienne is here. She's right with us. She can do that. Her family could do that. They possibly have the same DNA as he does, as Adrienne. But how willing, if we didn't have this relationship, 7 years later, could we call them up and say, hi, it's us, AJ needs bone marrow. And, that there's a potential to say, and who is this?
Right.
Right.
We kept that open, and, that was really good advice from our attorney, and who also is an adoptive mother. And she has one open adoption and one not open. And she, she said that it was the best decision she ever made.
So I'm so glad you brought that up, because there's more than just, peace of mind that can come out of an open adoption. Sometimes it's logistics like that. And both of you, when I spoke with you earlier, you were talking separately about AJ's needs because he was diagnosed with autism, right?
Yes, he was.
And what I think is sort of remarkable is that, and Adrienne, I don't know if this played in when you were choosing Doug and Cheryl, but that you actually have family that lives near them, and that one of your cousins, and then Cheryl's actually connected with your cousin who has a child that also is autistic. Can you talk a little bit about, maybe in hindsight, how you look back on your adoption decision now that you see just in these 7 years what's come out, and have you ever thought, well, because like Cheryl said, I agree. I think most women that I've spoken to who are considering adoption as a birth mother, that they could successfully parent their baby, or they could be successful and also choose adoption, that it's really a personal decision that's got to be right for you, and that most of these women, they would love their baby and give their life to give their baby whatever they needed. But that sometimes I know after an adoption happens, Adrienne, you and I were talking about this earlier, is you look back and think, wow, would I have been prepared for his needs, or what would that have been like if, would I be where I am right now had I chosen to raise him? Do you ever think that way, Adrienne?
Almost definitely. Like I was saying before, I had faced some challenges just within the last 3 years that I had said to myself, well, what if my son was there? I don't think, he would never deserve this. I wouldn't have wanted him to go through this. And then also with him, with my son actually being diagnosed with autism, it actually shed a lot of light on a lot of different things, not only for myself, but also for some of my other cousins who have always, faced challenges in school and things like that, and my aunts didn't know what was going on. But my mom could say, well, AJ's now dealing with this, or Alex is now dealing with this, and Adrienne dealt with this back when, she was younger, but they didn't call it autism back then. So it, it cast a light and on things that were dark, but also, it just made me, in hindsight, as you said, think back to what if I hadn't, but I'm so glad I did. My son, he just turned 7 on the 29th of January, and it's just, I look at my life now, and I can honestly say that I feel like I would not be in the place that I am, not only just physically, but just mentally as well, because I feel like I was always well beyond my years. My parents just always raised me with a very mature attitude, but it caused me to mature even the more because, I've gone through this. I know what it's like to be with a mother. I know what it's like to love and lose. I know all of these things, but it caused me to grow as a person. and also be more empathetic, be more compassionate, not just to people in my situation, but also outside of my situation. You know, so I'm thankful for it. And if I could say anything to anybody, any birth mothers that are possibly on the line, is that do it for you. Don't do it for anybody else. Do it for you, and do it for your child, if you are truly considering it, because at the end of the day, your child is what matters, because when you have a child, before you are a person, you are a parent. Mm-hmm. And even with my child living in Atlanta, just like I will never, ever, ever refer to my son as that boy. Even now, my son is 7 years old, and I still call him the baby. My mom says, call him Alex, and I say, he's the baby. He'll always be the baby to me. But you have to be a parent first. You have to think in the mindset of a parent, and just do it for the child if you are considering it.
Yeah. And Adrienne, too, I know, gosh, I feel like we could probably spend hours between all of you, and I just want to share that there's a ton of feedback coming from our audience just thanking you three for just opening up about your stories and how remarkable the relationship seems between all of you. And I know, Cheryl, you brought it up earlier, and I thought it was such a good observation, but you said initially after you brought AJ home, you not only wanted to bond with him as your son, you know, that you had this new child, you became parents for the first time, but you also wanted to respect Adrianne's space and grieving process. Adrienne, I know that one of the cool things that you do for Lifetime that we can't thank you enough for is that you are one of the peer supports that we have available for women thinking about adoption or moving through that process or moving through the after adoption phases or whatever support they need. What do you want people to know, because you were talking about looking at that and being glad the adoption happened, but that I know that it wasn't always an easy journey because there is that grief, the loss that happens with choosing adoption. And I think it's important not only for prospective birth parents to hear, but for adoptive parents to hear, because your child's birth parent is inevitably going to move through their own grieving. So do you want to talk a little bit about where your heart is for people? And what you told me earlier was just how much they have to feel it. And I think hearing it from you is going to help them understand it better than I could say.
Sure, not a problem. One thing, and I really do enjoy being a peer counselor because it's not only helpful to the mothers that I talk to, but it's also helpful for myself as well. I just personally feel when birth mothers come to me and they often say, well, how do you get through it? Number one, it took me at least a year to just get over the fact that I don't have my child here anymore. And although it may seem a little harsh, as a mother, placing your baby, you can equate it to a death. The grieving is just that heavy. There were times when I would go to bed crying and I would wake up crying, and my mom would say, you cannot do this every day. And I would look at her like, lady, you just don't know. You just don't know what's going through my mind right now. You have your two kids with you. You don't know what I'm feeling. But one thing that I tell the birth mothers from the beginning is you have to feel it. If you act like it doesn't exist, you do not have a heart. When they call me and they're crying, I say to them, if you were not crying, I would honestly not know that you were a mother. Because at the end of the day, you carried that baby, you bore that child, and you felt that heartbeat. You touched that baby. So at the end of the day, you have to feel it. You have to feel it. You have to accept it. And every day, I tell the birth mothers, if you have to stare at yourself in the mirror in all your crying and all of your snot and tears and everything, and look at yourself and tell yourself, I did the right thing. I did a good thing. And no matter what anybody tells me, I'm okay. I'm fine. I'm not wrong. I'm not ugly. I don't have the plague. People don't have to treat me like this because I won't allow myself to be treated like this, and I'm not going to beat myself up anymore. I am okay. I'm fine. And if you have to do that every day, I had to do that with myself. I had to drag myself in the bathroom 2, 3 o'clock in the morning and tell myself, you're okay. You're fine. You did the right thing. Nobody can tell you differently. And once you get to that point, you're going to say it to yourself without the tears, and you're going to be able to say to somebody else, I don't care what you think. My child is fine. I have the hope, I have the faith, and I have the courage to stand up and say, I did the right thing. Nobody else can tell you different because you won't tell yourself any different.
Mm-hmm. And Adrienne, I remember you telling me something that inspired me through a hard time I was going through, but you didn't even know you were doing it at the time. But one of the things you also said that you try and tell these women is, and like to reinforce what you're saying, that's what you told me, and I put it on a Post-it. I still have it on my mirror. You have to find the good in it. And I think that's a healthy thing for all grief, because even adoptive parents, when you realize maybe that you aren't going to be able to give birth to a child, or if you do go through a failed adoption, that when you're moving through those real grieving emotions, that actual process, that there's still good to be found in it to help you focus on the future and get back to what's coming, what you've been through, what you've learned, what's right about it. Adrienne, we had several people chime in right now. She is so wise. You know, and I think your authenticity is what really inspires other women who go to you for that peer support, but I'm sure that that's also probably always what Doug and Cheryl saw in you and felt confident that this is the right match and we would be able to commit to raising this woman's baby and having a relationship with her ongoing, because you are so honest about what you expect and want, but you're also understanding about, sort of the whole picture too.
Definitely. There's no other way to be but real. I can only be myself, and that's flaws and all. So I'm just thankful at the end of the day to have the parents that I had, to have the upbringing that I've had, and the life that I've had, because it shaped me into the person that I am today, both good and bad. So I'm thankful.
And I also have to add to you that was one of the things that we saw in Adrienne, was that she was open and honest. We talked about everything, and that authenticity really showed in those initial conversations.
Mm-hmm. And I would say, oh, Doug, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Adrienne that you hear today, that was the Adrienne we heard back when she was 19 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what impressed us, wow, this 19-year-old is sounding like this. She didn't sound like a 19-year-old at all.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I know that every adoption is as unique as the people who come together for the adoption, that there may be people who are thinking, gosh, I'm not even sure I'm that confident, and I'm 38, or gosh, I'm 16, and how will I know if I'm making the wise decision for my baby? But I think the point in your story is that you're open and honest with each other about your lives and what you see as being able to offer for this child and that you want for this child, and that you communicated that to each other, because I do think that sometimes the fears that come along with adoption, not wanting to step on toes and trying to be sensitive, sometimes I would say also you have the risk of not having conversations that should happen. And so I think the example here is to be yourselves, because you're going to be chosen for being yourself. You're going to be accepted for being yourself. And it's only going to be the right match when you're not hiding who you really are and how you want the adoption to go.
I have something also, that confidence in your decision, whether it's on the side where you're considering adoption for your child's placement, or if you're an adoptive parent, being confident in your decision. We had a comment come in a few minutes ago that said, you know, she had a very close friend tell her she was crazy for thinking about adopting. You know, what would you say to that, Doug or Cheryl?
You're not crazy. We didn't have anyone that questioned whether or not we should adopt. Everyone around us, anyone that supported anything that we did, as far as our family members, our friends, and we have a wide circle of friends, and not one person said that we were crazy. It is most definitely not prevalent in the African American community, and I would think that that would only be because of how we were raised and our surroundings and our community. It was one of those things that you just didn't do. We didn't adopt. We were families adopting family members, or fostering our family members, cousins or nieces, nephews, whatever. We just really, as a community, did not adopt. That time has really changed. That time has changed because I think mindsets have changed too. So in our vast amount of friends that we have never, no one has ever said that when they were told that we were thinking of adopting. Most of our friends and family members knew that every Saturday morning we got up and we spent 3 hours for about 8-10 weeks in a class about adopting, and you know, what type of experiences we would go through. We even had one of the instructors come to us and offered a baby that just was left on a doorstep, and you know, we weren't ready at that time, and you know, we could have gotten ready and our minds were ready, but we weren't really prepared. And that to me might have been our crazy moment when it came to, you know, thinking about adopting. But it wasn't that we wanted a child so badly that we would just halt everything and not be prepared to do so. Once we were prepared and had pretty much the support of everybody around us. I mean, when AJ came back that Valentine's Day, like a week or 2 later, we had a big party. And so all of our friends, you know, they were all here, and my family came, Doug's family came from California, and it was a big event in our lives. So stay strong. If people, you know, ask them, why do you think it's crazy? We hear about it all the time. We hear about celebrities adopting kids overseas. There are enough birth mothers that may be on the line today that know that there are people like Doug and I and Adrienne and her family that, you know, are all big proponents of adoption. And those are the people that you need to talk to. If you think about it, then there's something in your heart that's telling you it may be right. Find out the information and how that information applies to you in your life, and know that there's lots of support out there for you.
Thank you, Cheryl. Appreciate it. I know our family appreciates it too.
You're welcome.
Absolutely. And we had a question earlier too, just say, you know, is this typical for open adoption? And I know that what you guys have, it may not surprise all of you, the 3 of you, but for some people, they even birth mothers sometimes don't want to have this kind of friendship, this kind of ongoing relationship. You know, Adrienne, in particular, when you're speaking to other women choosing adoption for their children, and if they share with you that they aren't really interested in keeping in touch, you know, how do you usually encourage or support them through that, since that was such an aspect that helped you through that hard time? What do you usually tell people who they just don't want that?
Well, I'm going to be honest with you and say that I go against what they say, because I tell them, you say that now because you are so you are so far removed from, you want to be so far removed from the pain that you aren't willing to accept the connection. You aren't willing to accept what can happen, and the love that can be fostered from both sides of the coin, so that I tell them, even if you don't want contact for the first few years, do not allow yourself to become so hardened in your heart that you don't allow anything to get in, because you will, not only as a woman, but just as a person, I feel as though you will regret it wholeheartedly that you did not have any connection. We don't really have a lot of talk shows on TV anymore, but I just envisioned Alex coming on Montel Williams saying, I didn't know my mom for 25 years. Can you find my mom? I didn't want nobody finding me at 30 years old and saying, I don't even want to see you. I wanted to see you, but now I don't want to see you. I just refuse for that to be me. So like I tell them, if you need to take a break, tell that to your birth family, but do not sever the tie, because you will yearn for it later. Mm-hmm. And if you have to start yourself in baby steps, do that, but you're going to desire it.
And that's often what I explain is because I would say for both sides, it's pretty impossible to imagine keeping in touch with strangers. That's why it's important to talk with each other and get to know each other before the adoption happens, so that it's not just this, feeling forced kind of relationship, but that I will explain to women in particular who are saying, well, I want to make sure I know where my baby goes, who adopts my baby, but I'm just not sure that I could handle keeping in touch. That might be too hard. And I always say that same thing, Adrienne, which is you don't know how you're going to feel down the road, but it's important to know that open adoption essentially means that you know who adopts your baby and they know where their baby came from, and that there are benefits to open adoption even if it doesn't turn into this extended family type relationship, that tie is open, that opportunity is open, because 10 years from now you could be in a totally different position in your life and feeling stable and ready to connect, because the grieving is different for everyone. And the same thing for adoptive families is I usually try and tell them, you will probably be surprised how much you want to keep in touch with your child's birth mother, because you want to share those joys and those triumphs and, and the gratitude for, look at this family you helped to create with us. But that with open adoption, it doesn't always mean it looks like what you guys have, but that it means the opportunity is there if it's ever comfortable and desired.
If I could say anything to the prospective birth parent, and that would be always make your prospective birth mother feel as though you care, because that matters at the end of the day. If she does not feel your heart, if you are not forthcoming, and if you are not genuine, and you just don't lay it all out on the line, she'll feel as though you're closed off, and she will not, respond to that well. And that is also not a good way to start this process, because she needs to feel as though you hear her, and not that you hear her, the things that are coming out of her mouth, but you feel her heart. So if I could say anything to you all from a birth mother's perspective, that would definitely be it.
Thank you. Well, and I don't want to take up too much longer of your evenings. I feel like we've covered a lot of ground, but there's still so much more that could be covered. I just want to thank you all for being here. And, Doug and Cheryl, is there anything before, we round out tonight that's on your heart that you want to make sure, that people thinking about adoption, or that the people in the audience tonight know from you and your experience?
I would like to just end with and kind of piggyback on what Adrienne just said about feeling something with the birth mom. For me, I knew that I couldn't have children. And it was important to me that I felt that I knew who she was. And knowing who she is and knowing Adrienne, and this is specifically for Adrienne, is that she is a giver.
Mm-hmm.
And she gave me probably one of the best gifts that I'll ever receive in my life. And when I think about how she feels knowing that she knows exactly where AJ is, down to coming across my bridge in my driveway. She knows where he is. She knows what his life has been up to this point. And the gift that she has given to me, she made the right decision. And she also blessed me with the only child that I'll probably ever have. And on AJ's birthday, which just passed a few weeks ago, I sent her a nice little note because his birthday represents something that she did. She gave herself. She gave of herself. She gave a gift of God to someone else. And, you know, that's a bond that she and I it'll never be broken, because that gift is my biggest joy. And I thank her for that. And his birth, you know, on that day, it represents that bond that I share with her, and I love her dearly. I love her whole family. Hi, Priscilla. Big love.
I just like to end talking about an open adoption. One of the things I said to AJ's birth father was to think what's best for the child. And I think with open adoption, you kind of could say that same thing. Think what's best for the child, you know, whether it be something even medically wrong, if he needs something like a bone marrow or something like that. You don't have to stay in touch or have the same bond that Cheryl and I have with Adrienne. I don't think all adoptive matches will have that. But at least you could have it open to a level whereas, you know, you stay kind of in touch through maybe an email once every 6 months or a year, so you kind of know each other in case something medically does happen and you do need, you know, the DNA from the birth mother or something like that, that you could have just on that level of open adoption. I think that's very important.
Right, to have that medical history, but also in the future too. I know that we've had calls, even from birth families, sometimes that call and say, you know, I don't have a real tight relationship with them, but I just wanted to somehow get some information to them that, you know, my mother just went through liver cancer or something like that, and I wanted them to just keep an eye in that for the medical history, and just that opportunity is there to lay a foundation for the child to have those answers too. But I think what's special about your connection through AJ is just all the things that have come out that you have in common with each other that really has made it feel more like family, but that also because through the challenges that he faces as a child, that, you know, I'm sure being able even to talk with Adrienne about her cousin's experience with autism and being able to connect in that way too, it's kind of even an added element that a lot of people don't think about, is just that it's that birth family sometimes that creates this history, not just one parent, but if the opportunity is not there and you just have a connection with just the birth mother, that that there's information to be had there. And I know that like next week we're going to have Marty on a webinar and she'll probably speak to this more, but one of the things that Lifetime's founder often talks about is how you know, it's so hard for people who have closed adoptions, because whenever you're signing that child up for, you know, a new doctor or, you know, whatever it may be, if they have medical needs, that you're having to basically put a cross a slash across the page because you don't have that information, but at least even with prenatal records and just having that opportunity to talk with your child's birth mother, you have the opportunity to know, and give a doctor the benefit of your knowledge, but then also that when you have this ongoing relationship, I'm sure if something comes up with Adrienne or her family, that she would be the first to call and say, hey, you might want to look into this because this just happened, or I've been learning this, and that it's really a team effort. Well, thank you all so much. And I just want to look here because we had a few people pouring in some last-minute questions. We did have a question come in here because Adrienne spoke earlier about how she wanted Doug and Cheryl when they had already been chosen, and this question was, is it common for two birth mothers to want the same family? And I will just say it's not uncommon, but that generally speaking, we don't ever want to put adoptive parents in the position where they're having to basically do like job interviews with birth moms, because that's not really a fair position to put a woman who's seeking a family for her baby in. But in this case, clearly you can see that this match was meant to be. And Adrienne, I know that you make a joke about, how your prayer caused the broken heart from the first match, but I'm sure that Doug and Cheryl would probably agree that they couldn't imagine a different child in their family.
Not at all. Not at all. Not at all. And don't be discouraged. As I indicated before, things happen in the time frame that they are supposed to happen. And just as Libby just said, this was the perfect match. And that was one thing, too, that I love about Lifetime is that the birth mothers choose. And, the biggest thing for us, it was like, and I think more about myself, I really have it going on, that Adrienne really wanted us. But it's one of those things where you know that this is what she wants for her child, where she's going through that process and doing her research because she wants a better life for him or a good life for him. Our situation, there couldn't be a better life for him, but you want that. You want to find people that you want your child to be with, that will give him the best possible life that he could have. And if she's going through that much decision making, this is someone who knows what they want. They know what they want for their child. So it's back to that, do what's best for the child. And that's what I admire most about Lifetime, along with some of the other things. I had never heard of the peer counseling before I came to Lifetime, before we came to Lifetime. And, the after support is just amazing, the things that you guys do to support the birth mothers in, letting them make their decision and then supporting them all the way throughout, and even after the placement is made, the papers are signed, and now what? You have this support for them. So if you're on the line, this organization is probably one of the best. And from day one, we were sold.
Thank you, Cheryl. We didn't even script that for her. I just want to thank all of you tonight, and again for Adrienne, Cheryl, and Doug, for you to know. You can't see them pouring in, but all of these people just saying how much it has helped them to hear all of your perspectives, and how inspiring your relationship is, and just how much they see God's hand in bringing you together. And I think to go back, Cheryl, what you just said and what Adrienne has said earlier is that it really has to be the right intentions and the right fit. And that's really what I know that we at Lifetime try and promote, is we don't want anyone to feel as though they're moving into an adoption decision, whether from the adoptive family point of view or the birth parent point of view, that they're feeling forced into choosing adoption prematurely or for, or under any specifications or details that just don't sit right, that it needs to be the right fit. So if any of you have questions about your own personal adoption decision, please feel free to reach out to us one-on-one. You can always email us at adopt@lifetimeadoption.com, or you can always call our office too. Again, if you are thinking about adoption as an adoptive family, or if you're already waiting to adopt with Lifetime, you know that you can reach our office at 530-432-7373. And if you're joining us tonight and you're thinking about adoption as a birth parent, please call us anytime. We have a 24-hour hotline for pregnant women and for birth mothers thinking about adoption for a child, and that is 1-800-923-6784. And I just want to thank all of our guests again tonight, and thank you, Kim, for joining us and keeping the background running with all these questions that popped in. Kim, do you have anything you want to add before we close tonight?
No, I just had my button on mute so you wouldn't all hear my dog jingling around, because I think we all have a dog jingling near us. But I just want to say I am so grateful for the open hearts you guys have displayed for all of us tonight, that we can all receive and absorb, you know, the encouragement and your testimony and your personal experience. I mean, you guys are all amazing, obviously. It's apparent to see. So thank you all. And to the listeners, too, for being with us tonight and knowing that, you know, this is what it could be like on the other side. You know, you're walking through this right now, and we want to provide these resources for you and people you can talk to and connect with to learn more about what it could be like for you with adoption. And like Libby said, it may or may not be the best fit for everyone, but we're here to just share about it with you and encourage you along your path.
Thank you all, and we'll go ahead and say goodnight. And Adrienne, thank you again, and Doug and Cheryl, thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you.
Good
night, everyone.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
That was AJ saying good night.
Oh, yay.
He's so cute.
We'll talk with you all again soon.
Thank you all.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye.